In a post AGI world where all work is automated, everybody is on a universal basic income, how will men be able to climb the male dominance hierarchy to increase mate selection, basically to increase options? I want you to think about that. Ask yourself that. Because right now, let's say you're a guy who you're a 5 out of 10 innately, right? In terms of looks and height and genetic factors. But you can go put in a lot of effort, get a degree that's going to lead to a high paying job, and become a 7 out of 10. If you're earning, high six figures, or not even high six figures, low to mid six figures even, that dramatically increases how attractive you are to women. But in a post AGI world, you can't do that. So the point I'm trying to get to is men have had this social incentive to put in a lot of effort and work hard to build up society because in return it would increase their status and value, which would ultimately in turn give them greater mate selection, and that's what they ultimately cared about. Well, as AI gets better, all of that's going to go away. I want you to think about the consequences of that. What's going to be the new male hierarchy? My theory is that it's going to be entirely just looks. It's going to be just physicality. And now we come back to this whole new concept, this whole phenomena among Gen Z of looks maxing. Why did the looks maxing blow up so much? In the past, the advice for men to become more attractive, or, how do you make yourself more attractive to a woman used to be, working on your personality, working on your career, your finances, how you dress. And now it's almost entirely, flipped around to where, it's just genetic determinism. It's just your height, your facial bone structure, your frame, your face, your phenotype. These are the only things that matter. I think the reason this is happening is because Gen Z is subconsciously realizing this, that as AGI comes around, you know, intelligence and hard work just don't matter anymore, and that women are gonna just start selecting purely on looks. And we already saw this increase from, say, the silent generation to boomers, where when women entered the workforce, they weren't as financially dependent on a man, and they could select for things outside of just finances. Because before, women, in the 1950s, 40s, were completely financially dependent on a man, so a man's career was a huge proponent in whether how many women wanted to date him. And then once women could work for themselves and be financially independent, there was a shift where they started looking at other things more, such as appearance and height. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a liberal. I'm not saying one shouldn't work. But now with AGI, it's like you're putting that on steroids, where it's like women are already less financially dependent on men, and now if you have a universal basic income, then there's nothing that men can really do to differentiate themselves financially or career-wise. And really the only thing differentiating men is looks. And so I think we're going to see way more of this looks maxing stuff become more and more mainstream as men realize this. And it's going to cause maybe some issues in society, because you can't really change your looks to a large degree. Even with these whole, surgeries that these looks maxers talk about, if you actually look at most results, people don't look that much better. They don't look that much different. You can't really go that above your genetic baseline. Really, the main thing you can do is get to a low body fat and work out. And maybe if you have like some very obvious facial deformity, like just vastly disproportionate nose, you can do something for that and so forth. But if you're just like an average looking kind of guy, you're already lean. There's not really much you can do. So I think what's going to happen is that when men realize that there's really no point in putting in any effort and that it's not going to lead to more mate selection, they're going to distract themselves. And coincidentally, AGI is going to produce some of the best distractions because I think once we get to like artificial superintelligence, we're going to have full dive VR. I mean, VR that's just fully immersive and almost indistinguishable from reality. And what you're going to see is the men that don't get that cutoff to enter the dating market and have those romantic experiences, they're just going to immerse themselves in this VR. And they're probably never going to leave their little pods where they're eating their insects. Someone you'll get that one. They're just going to stay there and they're just going to immerse themselves in VR with a VR female girlfriend, companion. And women, I think, are going to form harems around these top tier guys. And we're going to revert back to how society was 100,000 years ago. And that's my last point. I want to get to this very interesting point. 100,000 years ago, if you look at the male like dominance hierarchy and what women selected for, it was almost entirely physical traits, right? So it was like height and bone structure and athleticism, things that made you a good hunter and protector. And then, with the agricultural revolution and eventually industrial revolution, things like intelligence and effort mattered a lot more. For example, in modern society, you could have some, a small, frail nerd with glasses who works in a quant trading firm and makes $500,000 a year. 100,000 years ago, that same guy would have been a loser in the tribe. He would have been celibate because for one, there's no glasses 100,000 years ago. He can't hunt, and he's just useless. But now that guy, he's making $500,000 living in San Francisco. He has a lot of mate selection. Well, what AGI is going to do is it's actually going to reverse that, and we're going to go back to the way it was 100,000 years ago, where now that, nerd, that small little dork, his intelligence, there's really no value to it because AI will be way smarter and think faster than him and better than him. So, human intelligence will just become a commodity. It won't really have any value. And AI will become the mind, and humans will just become the form. And all that'll matter is for humans will be form, and all the thinking and problem solving and creativity will get delegated to AI. And it'll be like this symbiotic relationship almost where humans can just go back to the way they were naturally 100,000 years ago. If you look at archaeological evidence, most men never reproduced. Before, monogamy was socially constructed because it's not natural. And, even when the West was practicing monogamy, a lot of cultures still had polygamy. For example, in Native American tribes, a lot of them were polygamous. There wasn't really this social monogamy before they became more westernized eventually after colonization. Well, what you're going to see is you're going to see us revert back to that natural order where you'll have these top tier genetic men and women form harems around them, and then the other 80% of men will just sedate themselves with these ever advancing technological distractions like virtual reality. So it'll be very interesting, and I do think that's where we're headed. So we can look forward to that. And I don't know exactly when it'll happen. It's hard to predict these things. But, I mean, just think about it for yourself. What other way could it possibly go? Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. As always, I'll see you next time.